Chapter 422. Sometimes, even Shun Yueji herself did not understand what benefits Feng Juqing had given them. However, some people were like this. Even if you could not give them anything, they would still inexplicably feel that you were good for them. They would die for you without any complaints, without any hesitation, and even sacrifice their lives for you. Shin Yueji was carefully protected behind the man. There was a faint smell of blood on his body. Wounds could be seen everywhere on his body. His snow-white robe had long been dyed red with blood, and his hair was also a little messy. "Your Majesty, I am not afraid. As a woman of the military family, even if I die standing, I will never kneel and beg for mercy. Jier, they are here for me. It has nothing to do with you. As long as I am here, I will not let you suffer any harm. Dog of an emperor. Did you ever think that this day would come when you killed more than 100 people of my Lu family?" The leader of the men in black pointed his sword at Feng Juqing. Shin Yueji didn't know why, but even though she knew he was the one who planned everything, she still felt the man standing in front of her suddenly stiffen. After Feng Juqing ascended to the throne, he had killed countless prestigious officials in the court within 3 days. Even their wives and children were not spared. At that time, he told the outside world that these people were conspiring to rebel and secretly did things that were detrimental to Feng country and the people of the capital. Therefore, he ordered them to be beheaded to give an explanation to the people. She was not the only one who was paraded on the streets. These officials who had once sacrificed their lives for Feng country were also paraded on the streets. The people carried baskets of rotten eggs and wild vegetables and threw them at the officials who were locked in cages. They seemed to have forgotten that during their most difficult times, it was these officials who cared for them and used their salaries to help them. They also seemed to have forgotten that when they were short of food, those officials would rather starve themselves to take care of these people. This was also why Shin Yueji did not like to be associated with others. So what if you treated some people well? She was not you, and you were not him. You would never be people of the same world. Some people were good, and some people were evil. An arrow shot toward Feng Juqing. Feng Juqing did not know what was going on. Perhaps it was because of what the black-clad man had said earlier, but Feng Juqing did not react in time. He stood there motionlessly. Li Yingying, who was in the carriage, was already burning with anxiety. She couldn't care less as she shouted, "Your Majesty, be careful." Shin Yueji also came back to her senses at this time. She pushed Feng Juqing heavily. The unprepared man staggered from the push, and because of her habit, she gave all her strength to him. Under the man's shocked gaze, she was only an arm's length away from the sharp sword. However, she leaned backwards. "Yuji." This time, Feng Juqing's calm eyes finally showed some emotion. It was as if the scene before his eyes overlapped with the scene from a few years ago. There was also a person who, in order to push away that fatal arrow, allowed her delicate body to fall down the cliff. At that time, he had a budget, and he pulled her back in time. But this time, he threw himself on the cliff and grabbed Shin Yueji's hand. His arm was dripping with blood, and the hand on his hand was holding Shin Yueji tightly. Was it because of a scheme, or because of something else, or perhaps it was because of his relationship with her? Chapter 423. At this moment, his heart was in a mess. He didn't understand and was in a daze. He didn't know why his heart was in a mess. His arm hurt. More blood flowed out from his wound, but he didn't dare to let go. Looking at Shun Yueji's pale face, he gripped her hand tightly. "Hold on tight. Don't let go. I'll pull you up. Your Majesty, as long as you're fine, this concubine can be at ease. You're the emperor of Feng country. Nothing can happen to you. Perhaps this concubine. Don't talk nonsense." The man interrupted her with a hint of anger in his voice. "Nothing will happen to me, and nothing will happen to you." Blood dripped onto Shun Yueji's face. Apart from the bone-chilling wind blowing on her face, the man's blood also dripped onto her face. She looked up at him from below. At this moment, Shun Yueji felt an inexplicable sense of comfort. Perhaps, in her previous life, she shouldn't have been pulled up by him. Perhaps, she should have pried open his fingers and let herself fall. All of this had been personally planned by him, so why was he still able to show such deep emotions? He was so affectionate that Shin Yueji couldn't see any flaws. Tears flowed from the corner of her eyes. She saw that the man's injured arm clearly couldn't hold her firmly, but it was still strenuous. "Your Majesty, let go. If you continue like this, your hand will be crippled." No, the man's smooth forehead was already covered in sweat. He grabbed Shin Yueji's wrist tightly. "Use this concubine's strength to climb up. Don't let go. If this concubine uses your Majesty's strength to climb up, your Majesty's arm will really be crippled. Your Majesty, if this concubine dies, will you remember this concubine forever?" "Don't talk nonsense." The man's voice deepened. "This concubine once asked about your Majesty and the former Empress." She mentioned Gu Yueqin at this time. It was clear that the man's grip on her hand was about to loosen. But very quickly, he reacted and grabbed her hand again. "If you have anything to say, just say it. Yueji, listen to me. You can't be stubborn at this time. This concubine orders you to climb up." Before the emperor became the emperor, he and the eldest miss of the Gu family went out for a parade. They also encountered a group of assassins in black. At that time, it was also a narrow escape. The emperor risked his life to protect the late empress. The man did not speak. His dark eyes were somewhat indecipherable. Shin Yueji smiled faintly. At that time, the former empress was saved by the emperor, so in the last few years, perhaps the emperor's memory will not be so deep. But if this time, this concubine was not saved by the emperor and fell off the cliff, will the emperor remember this concubine forever? Yuji, realizing what she was about to do, Feng Juqing's heart thumped furiously in his chest as he felt an inexplicable sense of panic. However, Feng Juqing only tightened his grip on her. "Come up first. I said that I wouldn't let anything happen to you, so you'll definitely be fine. I still have a group of secret guards hiding nearby. They will be here soon. If you're worried about me, hold on for a while longer. When they arrive, you and I will be fine." "Your Majesty, have you ever really loved a person?" Shin Yueji looked at him and suddenly smiled. In the past, this concubine liked the regent and liked to wander around behind him. Even if he looked at me, I would be happy for a few days and nights. But the regent didn't like this concubine. This concubine liked him for so long. In the end, this concubine finally got tired. This concubine wanted to enter the palace, but after meeting the emperor, this concubine found out what true love is. Chapter 424. This Chia can feel the emperor's nostalgia and love for the late empress. Sometimes, this Chia feels jealous. In this Chia's eyes, even older sister empress doesn't seem to be as important as a dead person in the emperor's heart. "I also want your Majesty to remember that even if your Majesty doesn't love me, I can do what the former empress can do for your Majesty. I can die for your Majesty. I cannot distract your Majesty." Shin Yueji, I order you to climb up. Your Majesty, if there is a next life, I hope that you will no longer be the emperor, and I will not be a woman from a family of generals. We will just be a couple from an ordinary family. The last sentence was a little fake, but also a little sincere. Shin Yueji just couldn't accept it. She was loyal to him, but why did she end up like this in the end? Even if she didn't love him anymore, she still wanted to ask for an explanation. She wanted to know, if they were just a couple from an ordinary family, would he still use her so much? Would he treat her sincerely? Or could it be that he still had his own ambition? Would he give himself to someone else and get what he deserved in return? He would climb up step by step. Even if he wasn't the emperor, he would climb to the highest position. That was him. "Your Majesty, your hand is bleeding, and I feel distressed. I like you so much, I won't let your hand be ruined because of me." She opened the man's big hand, one by one, under the man's dark eyes. The man's eyes widened, and his thin lips almost turned red. "Shin Yueji." The 3 words were squeezed out from the gap of his teeth, and then he saw that his already numb hand was opened by her, and her whole body was falling uncontrollably. Her beautiful dress had been dyed red with blood, and even her plain face was covered with his blood. There was a smile at the corner of her mouth, as if it was a lifetime ago. He seemed to see the woman who, for him, no matter how much she suffered, would raise her head to smile at him quietly and say that she was fine. At that moment, His heart suddenly hurt so much that he felt like he was about to suffocate. He rubbed his chest, and it felt like someone was pulling at his heart over and over again, causing him to feel endless pain and torment. However, it didn't want his life. How did this happen? Things shouldn't have developed this way. There should have been another ending. It shouldn't have been like this. He would have been fine. Shin Yueji would have been fine, and they would all be fine. This wasn't the ending he wanted. It wasn't. His hidden guards, who were lying in ambush not far away, had all arrived, and the group of black-clothed men were quickly subdued. He looked at the leader of the black-robed men and walked toward him. He used his sword to lift the black veil on his face. It was a completely unfamiliar face, and it was filled with hatred. Why didn't you discuss such a dangerous matter with me? Or do you think that I don't have the qualifications to protect you? I didn't you. If I didn't come here in person, would you let me know that Feng Juqing sent a message to the world saying that you fell off the cliff in order to save him? Emma Wushang, what's wrong with you? The next moment, the man gripped her wrist tightly, not allowing her to break free at all. The man pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. His cold face was devoid of warmth as he buried his face in her neck. Jier, I don't want to lose you again. Do you know that losing you once, I'm like a walking corpse? Chapter 426. Now that I've finally managed to keep you by my side, don't make me feel afraid, okay? I've said it before, Emma Wushang. I know what I'm doing. Before this, you also promised me that you wouldn't interfere in my affairs. I have my reasons for doing this. Moreover, you're so busy every day and have your own things to do. I don't want you to spend all your time on me. This will make me feel, how can anything compare to you, Jier? You know that I don't care about anything. I only care about you. I don't need to do anything. I just want to stay by your side, accompany you, take care of you, and not let anyone hurt you. But you keep rejecting me. In your heart, I've never existed, right? No matter what you do, you disdain to mention it to me. Even if you put your life on the line, I don't deserve to know, right? Men were born to be people of few words. In both her previous and previous lives, the only change was that Emo Wushang was more thick-skinned and shameless when he spoke to her. But sometimes, his words were still pitifully few. But he wouldn't say so much to her all at once like today. Moreover, they were all words from his heart. That dull and low voice was full of helplessness and pain, just like a person who had been abandoned by her. Shin Yueji was just about to push him away and explain when she was caught off guard. She felt a warm sensation on her neck. She was shocked. He's crying? She felt the man's tears falling on her neck. 1 drop, 2 drop, soaking her neck until it was boiling hot. For a moment, she was dumbfounded. She stood rooted to the ground, not knowing what to say or how to react. After a long time, the man hugged her without letting go. It was so long that Shin Yueji didn't know how long it had been. In short, she felt that a long time had passed. Emo Wushang, I really didn't mean to hide it from you. To me, it's really a small matter. I care about my life more than anyone else. How can I put myself in danger? I didn't tell you because I can do it on my own. I don't need to rely on men to do what I want to do. Secondly, I've wasted too much of your time these days. I know that you have a lot of things to deal with in private, so I really don't want to trouble you. I'm sorry for making you worry. I promise I won't do it again. Shin Yueji's heart is very uncomfortable, but she still grabs the man's sleeve. Next time, if there is such a thing, I will discuss it with you personally. Don't be angry, okay? She struggled to get up from the man's arms. However, the man hugged her tightly and didn't give her a chance to break free. That tight strength seemed to want to melt her into his bones. Emo Wushang, you've hugged me for so long. My body is covered in blood. I want to find a place with water to clean myself. I feel very uncomfortable like this. The man hugged her and did not have the slightest intention of letting go. Hey, don't you think the smell of blood on my body is disgusting? Chapter 427. Shin Yueji was shocked. Emo Wushang, what are you doing? Put me down first. The road is slippery. I'll take you to find water. Obviously, the man was very familiar with the geography of the Broken Intestines cliff. He carried her down the steep slope, through a green forest, and Shun Yueji could hear the sound of water from afar. It was sloping down from a high place. It was a waterfall as high as 10 people. How do you know this place? You used to come here often? Putting her down from his arms, Imo Wushang did not speak, but just stared at the rapid flow of water from above. When Feng Juqing and her met with an accident at the Broken Intestines Cliff, he was in the dark. If Feng Juqing did not protect him, he would protect her. He also saw with his own eyes the dependence and deep love in her eyes for the man. At the moment of crisis, it was he who held her hand and pulled her up from the steep cliff. Just now, the scene from a few years ago was repeated, but this time, it was she who personally opened the man's hand. Even when she said those words of deep love to him, Imo Wushang could no longer see the affectionate look she had when she faced Feng Juqing a few years ago. Her heart, as expected, no longer had him. It could not be said that there was no him. Perhaps there was still him. But this deep love, unswerving love, was gradually being ground down, slowly disappearing. The smell of blood, and the blood on her face, a lot of it dried on her face. Shin Yueji was a little disgusted by this sticky smell and touch. Walking to the river, she first washed the serum on her face, and the hem of her clean dress was also stained with blood. She took off her coat, as if she was going to the river to wash when the man did not exist. The man stood 3 steps away from her. Perhaps because some of the blood had soaked through her clothes and touched her skin, Shin Yueji began to hesitate before she made the final move. She looked back at the man 3 steps away from her. Imo Wushang, I want to take a bath. Stay away from me, don't peek. The man slightly raised his eyebrows, his handsome face expressionless, but he stood there with his own thoughts, not moving. Imo Wushang. Shin Yueji gritted her teeth and shouted, Did you hear what I said? I want to take a bath. Stay away from me. Don't peek. There are wild beasts passing by at the foot of the mountain. I will guard you here, or else you will not be safe. Have you ever seen a beast that isn't afraid of water? Besides, if she went into the water, the beasts wouldn't be able to swim. Even if there were beasts, they wouldn't be able to do anything to her. The man paused and frowned. There are snakes in the water and many unknown poisonous things. Shun Yueji, she held a handful of water and waved it towards the man. Only a few drops of water splashed on his handsome face. The man didn't dodge. He stood where he was. In order to make it easier for her to splash him with water later, he took 2 steps forward. Shin Yueji lost her temper because of his subconscious shameless action. Forget it, she muttered to herself. It wasn't like she hadn't seen it before. She took off her inner clothes. When she was only left with a small doo-doo, she hesitated. The man behind her was even more terrifying and savage than a beast in her heart. She put the clean clothes on the shore and waded into the water. Imo Wushang looked at the clothes she had neatly piled on the shore. The clothes were wet in many places, and he remembered that she would have to wear clothes after taking a bath. She would catch a cold wearing these wet clothes. Chapter 428. His dark eyes dimmed a little. He stepped forward, picked up the clothes she had taken off on the shore, and then turned to go elsewhere. Shin Yueji didn't dare to soak in the water for too long. Perhaps it was because of Imo Wushang's words that there was something scary in the water. She took a quick bath and swam back to the shore until the sticky smell of blood on her body dissipated. What are you doing? She looked at the clothes that the man handed to her. Shin Yueji took it. There was still heat on it. For a moment, she couldn't tell what she was feeling. She just said, Did you dry my clothes? The clothes are damp. You will catch a cold if you wear them. The man gave a brief explanation. Seeing Shin Yueji come out of the water, he consciously turned around and let her put on her clothes first. Imo Wushang, why are you here? Is it because you are worried about me? After she put on her clothes, Imo Wushang turned to look at her. There was a rare seriousness and gentlemanly look on his handsome face. But the way he looked at her was clearly saying, Otherwise, didn't Hong Fui come to you for something? I can't go back now. I can only go back after Feng Juqing sends someone to find me. Maybe I will have to stay here for a few days. You can go back first. Don't worry about me. Before she finished speaking, the man hugged her waist again. He didn't say anything, but it was better than talking. Shin Yueji could feel that as long as she was here, the man would not leave. She felt warm and sad in her heart. Such a good man. Why did she put all her heart on Feng Juqing and not look at him more? If she had fallen in love with Imo Wushang, would nothing have happened? Maybe she and Imo Wushang now. She clutched the man's collar tightly. Imo Wushang, can you not be so good to me? It was so good that she didn't know how to refuse his kindness. She could only accept it with a clear conscience. She said that she was willing to accept him, but she didn't know how long she could hold on and what the consequences would be. The man looked down at her, his black eyes as bright as stars. His tight lips eased a little because of the anger just now. You only realize that I am so good to you now? Shun Yueji subconsciously grabbed his collar. I realized it a long time ago. Why are you so nice to me? What if I can't give you what you want? Jier knows what I want. Looking at his handsome face, Shin Yueji choked for a moment, her face inexplicably hot. In case I can't give it to you. Carrying her into the cave, Imo Wushang took off his outer robe and placed it on a hard rock before placing her on it. As Shin Yueji sat on it, the man's tall body also pressed down. Shin Yueji was startled and subconsciously placed her hands on his chest. Imo Wushang, don't mess around. Her lips were blocked. Unlike the previous few kisses, the man's kiss this time was gentle with a hint of roughness. It was as if a storm had suddenly started after the calm of the storm. Shin Yueji's hands were restrained by the man, and she could not move. She kept her mouth shut and did not want the man to come in, who knew that he would directly touch her chest with one hand. Seeing that she still didn't let go, his other large hand wandered around her body wantonly, vaguely showing signs of moving downwards. Imo Wushang, don't. The tip of the man's tongue slipped in as he wished and entangled with her. After the kiss, it felt like an eternity. Shin Yueji did not know how much time had passed. Chapter 429. She licked her lips, which were numb from his kiss, and complained, Haven't I coaxed you? Why are you angry again? I just apologized to you. The man snorted. Who accepted your apology? Listening to his tough tone, Shin Yueji also became angry. This is my own business. If you can't stand it, then don't look. Who asked you to intervene? I'm not a fool. Even if you didn't come, I wouldn't let myself get hurt. When she met the man's dark eyes, Shin Yueji swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. She sat on the stone and turned her back to him. She didn't know how long it took until her waist was held in the man's arms. Her nose was full of the man's scent. She heard the man's helpless sigh from above her head. Shin Yueji's nose was sour, and she was stuffy in his arms. Don't be angry, okay? You usually indulge me. You will make me feel that you don't care about me. The man rubbed her head. In your heart, is my love for you so unbearable? Who asked you to be angry with me? I heard that most men are narrow-minded when they are angry with women. Now you know I'm narrow-minded. Shin Yueji, if you want to be angry, then be angry. I won't coax you anymore. Imo Wushang, since you are so difficult to please, why are you still here? Go back to your regent's mansion immediately. I don't need you to accompany me. Shin Yueji finally calmed down. Because of the man's words and the obvious sharp tone, she pushed him away discontentedly and got up from the man's arms. When she saw that the man really didn't say a word this time, nor did he come forward to ask her to stay, but turned around and left the cave. The strong and tall figure slowly disappeared from her sight. Shin Yueji's eyes turned red in an instant. There were countless waves rolling in her heart, which was very unpleasant. Under her body, the man considerately took off the robe for her to prevent her from catching a cold. She could still smell the man's unique scent when she touched it. She knew that the man was angry for her own good. He blamed her for not discussing with him in advance and taking such a big risk. If anything happened, she might not even be able to save her own life. Shin Yueji knew everything, but she was still stubborn, especially when she saw the man was angry but still held back. In her heart, she was happy that the man cared so much about her. Perhaps it was because she was used to hearing the gentle and lingering tone of the man when he spoke to her. She could not accept him suddenly being a little more firm. She wiped the corners of her eyes and found that there were really tears flowing out. She picked up the clothes on the rock and was about to chase after them, But when she ran out of the cave, she hesitated. She uncontrollably withdrew her legs and feet in time. She sat back down in the distance, feeling lost. She held the man's clothes in her arms. Sitting on the hard and damp stone was not comfortable at all. She was wondering if she had really gone too far this time. But she did all this just to gain Feng Juqing's trust. Even if his trust was zero, there had never been a woman who would throw away her life for him at such a critical moment. In the past, he was the one who protected her, but now, it was another woman who protected him. She was taking a step on her own path of revenge. In the future, such things would happen again, whether there was a Mo Wushang or not. Chapter 430. She and he were not on the same line. His identity and background were suspicious. Just like him, he had promised himself that he would not lie to her, but he still hid his identity. Xin Yueji lay on the stone, unable to feel the cold and damp touch. Her mind was full of Mo Wushang's resolute back view. When she woke up again, what came into view was a man dressed in black, and his muscular chest was slightly moving. Other than the man's unique scent, Shun Yueji also smelled the fragrance of meat. She thought she was dreaming. Didn't the man leave? Then who was the man holding her in his arms? She stared at the man in confusion, as if trying to tell if she was dreaming or if the man did not leave. She pinched the man's face. Mo Wushang, is it really you? The man wrapped her hand in his palm and kissed the back of her hand. I'm sorry, it was my fault just now. I won't lose my temper with you in the future. Are you hungry? I just want to roast some rabbit meat for you. So, Mo Wushang did not leave at all. He just felt hungry and went to hunt some rabbits for her. Xin Yueji's nose turned sour, and she threw herself into the man's arms. I thought you didn't want me anymore. The words were sad and powerless. For a moment, Shun Yueji's heart was flustered. Mo Wushang was too good to her. He indulged and tolerated her. It was hard for her to imagine what would happen if, because of today, she and Mo Wushang no longer had any entanglements. Would she still be able to calmly do what she wanted to do? Would she still think of him? Many years in the future, would she remember that there was such a man who had once treated her so well? Don't cry. Mo Wushang gently wiped the tears on her face. His eyes fell on her little mouth that was sobbing because of the grievance. Just now, she said that she was afraid that he would not want her anymore. He carefully held her in his arms. You are already a woman in my bones. How can I bear to not want you? He never thought that these words would come out of her mouth. Even if she said no, it would be him. He was afraid that she would say no. He was afraid that she would dislike him one day. But he did not expect. She was actually worried that he might not want her anymore. Jeer, don't cry. It's all my fault. I was just afraid that you would be hungry, so I want to find you something to eat. When I came in, I saw that you were asleep, so I want to roast the rabbit. I'll bring it to you when you wake up. He took the rabbit meat from the rack and said, I just roasted it and it's still warm. Do you want me to feed you? Then why didn't you say anything just now? Why did you turn around and leave? Xin Yueji sobbed. Just like when she was still Gu Yueqin, she left so decisively without any explanation. I'm just angry that you risked your life. Mo Wushang looked at her solemnly. I don't want to go through such a dangerous thing a second time. He was afraid. Chapter 431. Xin Yueji tore a large piece of barbecued meat and handed it to the man's mouth. You eat first. She met the man's puzzled eyes. Xin Yueji leaned over and kissed the man's smooth chin. You've been busy and haven't eaten anything. Fill your stomach first. I can't finish it all anyway. The man looked at her delicate smile and felt wronged after crying. He opened his mouth and let her put a piece of rabbit meat into his mouth with her small black hand. Mo Wushang, I just remembered that you smashed everything in my Jilan courtyard the day before yesterday. Not a single thing is intact. I haven't even settled the score with you, yet you still dare to get angry at me? She could clearly see the man's dark eyes flicker. Mo Wushang kissed her little mouth and asked, Is the rabbit delicious? Xin Yueji nodded cooperatively.
Yes.
Is one enough? I'll go and catch another one for you. Sensing that he was changing the topic, Xin Yueji sneered and grabbed his collar to stop him from moving. Where do you want to go? Come back and tell me clearly. I'm hurt. Shin Yueji didn't understand why he suddenly said that. Her face quickly showed a surprised expression. She quickly pulled his clothes and checked his injuries. Where are you hurt? Take off your clothes and let me see. Shangguan, you beat me? Shangguan, you beat you? Shin Yueji narrowed her eyes and tried to pull off his clothes. Where? Let me see. Besides, you're so good at martial arts. I know Shangguan you knows martial arts, but how could he be your opponent? Imo Wushang, tell me the truth. What's going on between you two? You don't care about me anyway. Imo Wushang looked indifferent. It seemed that he was going to pull up his clothes again. It doesn't matter. As long as I love you, it doesn't matter if you don't care about me. Shin Yueji. Looking at him twitching, Shin Yueji couldn't help but pull down his big hand. Imo Wushang, are you out of your mind again? Let me ask you, when did you two fight? No, he didn't like me and beat me. Shin Yueji. After a long time, he finally squeezed out a few words from his mouth. Why do I not like you? Perhaps it's because Ji dotes on me? The man looked at her. Shin Yueji was startled. Even the hand that was tearing his clothes was startled. However, she still did not slow down. Instead, she pulled his clothes. The loose robe was on his body. Right now, he was only wearing a tight suit. Therefore, when Shin Yueji tore it off, it was abnormally easy. She then looked at his smooth chest and saw a bright purple mark. She touched it with her little hand. Is this the place? The man looked a bit aggrieved and pressed her hand. Well, it hurts. Jeer, rub it. Don't you know how to dodge when he hits you? Don't tell me you can't beat him. Shin Yueji looked at the wound on his chest. It was a white expanse, and this large patch of purple was as dazzling as it could be. It would be a lie to say that she was not angry in her heart. Not only was she angry, but she also felt an inexplicable heartache. Although Shangguan Yu is a gentleman, I have long seen through him. If he really wants to achieve a certain goal, he will do anything. He will do anything. And you. Chapter 432. She glared at the man in front of her. When have you ever let yourself be taken advantage of? Tell me, what are you up to this time? No other ideas, Ji doesn't feel sorry for me. Looking at his aggrieved expression, Shin Yueji's heart softened. She quickly touched his face. Okay, I'm afraid of you. Tell me, does it still hurt? Did you see a doctor and apply medicine? The man shook his head. Shin Yueji glared at him. Then what do you want? Jeer, kiss me. Shin Yueji's face immediately heated up when she realized that he was asking her to kiss him there. Yet, this man looked so serious and said such serious words. Looking at his serious face, it was as if she was the one who thought wrong, and the man was just saying it casually. After helping him put on his clothes, Shin Yueji began to eat the roasted rabbit meat. Forget it, I don't feel sorry for you anyway. If you want to die, go ahead. If you die, I will remarry. Imo Wushang was speechless. Looking at the little woman he missed sitting in front of him and eating with relish, the man's dark eyes were deep and dark. She really didn't care about him? In this wilderness, Shin Yueji suddenly realized that although the man was not good at cooking, he was quite good at roasting things. She did not know what he had sprinkled on the rabbit meat, but it did not taste sweet. Instead, the taste was moderate and exceptionally delicious. Imo Wushang, are you busy now? The man replied angrily. Not busy. Not busy? Since you're not busy, then go catch another rabbit for me to roast. You're not going? If you don't want to go, then forget it. After eating, I will go catch one myself. Anyway, there are many wild beasts in this wilderness. If you are not worried that I will. Before she could finish, she saw the man suddenly stand up, obviously to catch a rabbit. As he stood up, Shin Yueji quickly stood up and ran in front of him, blocking his way. Imo Wushang stood where he was and stared at her for a while. He frowned in confusion. Go and catch it now, clean it, and come back to roast it. It just so happens that you are almost done eating. Shin Yueji didn't say anything. Instead, she raised her greasy little hand and suddenly wrapped it around the man's neck. Her little mouth covered in rabbit grease sealed the man's thin lips. Feeling the man's tall and sturdy body, she was startled. Shin Yueji stopped and then left the man's lips. Is it delicious? For some strange reason, the man nodded stiffly. Shin Yueji's eyes carried a smile. She moved closer and bit the man's thin lips again. Does the wound on your chest still hurt? The man shook his head. Then, Shin Yueji kissed him again. Do you still think I have no conscience? Yes. This time, the man reacted quickly. Shin Yueji stuffed a mouthful of rabbit meat into his mouth and said, Good boy, let's go catch some rabbits. The man's handsome face softened and he calmed down. His beautiful lips curved slightly. I'll be back soon. Wait for me here obediently and don't run around. Looking at the man's back as he left, Shin Yueji could not help but smile. This man, really? Sometimes when he lost his temper and let his temper run wild, she actually felt that he was damned cute. Moreover, Shin Yueji also found that no matter how angry this man was because of her, as long as he was kissed and coaxed by her, he would immediately recover. She sat on a wide rock and ate the rabbit meat alone. The cave was dark, but because there was light coming in from the outside, the inside of the cave seemed especially bright. Chapter 433. Shin Yueji realized that she didn't feel cold at all. She didn't know if it was because of the barbecued meat, but she felt warm in her heart and body. Shin Yueji didn't know if it was because of her quarrel with the man, but she didn't feel cold at all. Instead, she felt warm in her heart and body. Your Majesty, there is a secret report from the palace. There is an urgent matter that requires you to return to the palace as soon as possible. Above the broken heart cliff, Feng Juqing's bloody clothes had been cleaned and even the wounds on his body had been bandaged. It had been nearly 4 hours since Shin Yueji fell off the cliff. The secret guards he sent down to search for her were still nowhere to be found. Qiu Yang saw him like this and remembered the secret report from the palace. He couldn't help but remind him, Your Majesty, Imperial concubine Shan is a good person. She will be fine. Dozens of well-trained secret guards with high martial arts skills have gone down from here to search for her, but now there is no trace of her. Yueji is just a woman. No one knew better than him how high the broken heart cliff was. He originally had his own plan, but he didn't expect that Shin Yueji didn't act according to his original plan. He thought that all women in this world were afraid of death. They liked glory and wealth and relied on their husbands. Even Gu Yueqin, who used to be the center of everything, was nothing more than this. So he felt that she was boring, even if she liked him to the point that she would give everything for him. But he didn't love her. Perhaps he still cared about her a little. He cared about how much she cared about him and how much she liked him. He cared about how obedient she was. Perhaps, in his heart, she was still better than those women. After all, she had been with him since he had nothing. But he also didn't expect that a daughter born in a family of generals who had lived a luxurious life since she was young, never suffered any hardships or grievances, would be willing to die to protect him. Even Gu Yueqin couldn't do it. A few years ago, he held Gu Yueqin's hand. She was also at the bottom of the broken heart cliff, looking at his body full of injuries. She also cried and begged him to let go. But at that moment, how could he really let go? Even though his body was in pain, even though countless wounds had opened up, he did not let go of her hand. It was just that his plan was to pull her up from the bottom. He wanted her to devote all of her loyalty to him. But Shin Yueji, however, she pried open her fingers and pried open his fingers one by one. Then, she fell off the cliff. Feng Juqing didn't know what was going on, but he felt like he was possessed by a demon. It was like he was in a dream. He was so deep in a dream that he couldn't tell if the scene before him was something that had happened a few years ago, or if it was something that was happening right now. Emperor? Qiu Yang looked at him worriedly. Of course, he also knew that if Shin Yueji fell off this high cliff, she would be smashed to pieces. But when he saw Feng Juqing's appearance, he was still a little shocked. The emperor had always been the center of the court affairs. All these years, he had always kept it in his heart. Even the late empress didn't let the emperor put aside the government affairs and put her in charge. But now, he had mentioned the secret report from the palace twice in front of the emperor, but he didn't get any response from the man. It seemed that he didn't hear it, but he also seemed to hear it. But his heart was at the bottom of the cliff, and his heart had already been hooked by the person below. Chapter 434. Your Majesty? Xiaoyang was worried, so he called out again. Feng Juqing seemed to come back to his senses. His eyes were scarlet and bloodshot. Your Majesty, Imperial concubine will be fine. She is so kind, and I believe that God will take care of her. Li Yingying got out of the carriage. She still had a lingering fear after what had happened just now. Her face was pale. Naturally, she had seen the scene where Shan Yueji fell off the cliff to protect her man. She was shocked. She had suspected that she had no feelings for the emperor, but now she was willing to die for him. Since she cared about him so much, why did she bring her into the palace to seduce the emperor? Feng Juqing saw her familiar face. He didn't know what was wrong with him. Suddenly, he stepped forward and took Li Yingying into his arms. Hugging her tightly, he hugged her tightly. He had always been fearless in the face of danger, but today he lost his composure. Qiner, is that you? You're back? Your Majesty. Li Yingying couldn't breathe because of him. She started to struggle in his arms. Your Majesty, I'm Yingying. You've mistaken me for someone else. Your Majesty. When she saw Xiaoyang behind him through the man's body, the latter covered his mouth and coughed softly. He said respectfully, Your Highness, there is an important matter in the palace that requires the emperor to return to the palace to deal with in time. Please help me persuade the emperor to return to the palace as soon as possible. Li Yingying knew that Xiaoyang's words were for her, but she was shocked. She didn't know how to answer him. After all, she wasn't the real empress. Moreover, the emperor was conscious. He just thought she was the former empress at this moment, if she rashly. But when she met Xiaoyang's pleading eyes, Ba. Benefactor Qiu is right. Please help me persuade the emperor to return to the palace. Guard Qiu is guarding here. If Miss Shun is found, Guard Qiu will inform the emperor as soon as possible. Kong Yin got out of the carriage. He had seen so much excitement, but he didn't intervene. He had been watching the show with folded arms. Yesterday, he had already told Shin Yueji everything. He believed that Shin Yueji's choice was all within her plans, but he had never imagined that she would put on such a show. She was returning everything that Feng Juqing had given her. He couldn't help but rejoice that he had chosen to rely on this woman. Sure enough, after 9 years of marriage, in terms of understanding, he really couldn't compare to Shin Yueji. Seeing that even the emperor's most valued great master Kong Yin was begging her, and seeing the young emperor's pitiful appearance, Li Yingying couldn't bear to see him like this. She gathered her courage and reached out to caress the man's back. Your Majesty, let's return to the palace first. Nothing will happen to the imperial consort. Bodyguard Qiu will be here to guard her for you. General's residence. From the moment the emperor's carriage was attacked on the Broken Heart Cliff to the moment Shin Yueji fell off the cliff, the people in the general's mansion immediately received the news. However, at this moment, the general's residence was as stable as Mount Tai. No one was anxious. I never thought that the Prince Regent would go in person. General, madam, what do you think? Did the son-in-law do well this time? Double Happiness dutifully poured tea for the two of them. Shinhe took a sip calmly and crossed his legs. Not bad, not bad. I didn't choose the wrong son-in-law. Sure enough, the Prince Regent understands me the most. Chapter 435. Madam, Ji and the Prince Regent are down there. A man and a woman alone. What if? You're not serious. What are you talking about? Shin Xiu, who was drinking tea, listened to his words and almost threw it at him. If not for our people guarding below, if they knew that Ji fell off the cliff, AI, you say, what is this girl doing? Why didn't she suddenly tell us? We almost thought that the old-haired person is going to die before the black-haired person. My daughter is really smart. She made such a scene and saved the emperor. In this way, won't the emperor like her even more? Oh, by the way, Double Happiness, where did your young master go? Oh, young master. Double Happiness poured another cup of tea for Madame Shan and said, he knew that something happened to Mississippi. He fell off the cliff and went to the street to cry. If General's wife thinks it's embarrassing, I can pull young master back, but I may not be able to do it alone. General and Madam must send more people to help me. Shun Yueqi pulled a few of his old friends and cried on the street. The common people in the capital didn't know what had happened, but after he did this, they all knew that the eldest daughter of the Shin family had fallen off the cliff to save the emperor, and her life was uncertain. Shin Yueji's feat was praised by the people in the capital. They didn't expect the eldest daughter of the Shun family to be so heroic. She was not weaker than a man. She was indeed the daughter of the Shin family. Shun Yueqi cried his heart out on the street. Occasionally, a few pedestrians would come over to comfort him. As a result, Shun Yueqi wiped his tears and snot on his body. They quickly walked away with a black face and didn't even want to talk to him. After crying for a long time, Shun Yueqi saw the corner of a white robe appear in front of him. Looking up from the corner of the robe, he saw Shangguan Yu's handsome face covered in scarlet. He used to be gentle and refined, but now he was like a wolf and a wild beast. He looked very different from his usual amiable and approachable self. If he used to be a docile cat, now he looked like a crazy tiger. When Shen Yueqi saw him, he only glanced at him before withdrawing his gaze and continuing to sit on the ground, wailing loudly. After crying for a while, he found that Shangguan Yu was still staring at him. He stopped crying and looked up at him. "Young Master Shangguan, are you going to sit here and cry with me?" Her voice was sobbing as if she had suffered a great grievance. Shangguan Yu's face did not change much. It was still the same face as before, cold as frost, so stiff that it seemed as if only a layer of dry skin was left. If not for his scarlet eyes, Shun Yueqi would have thought that the man in front of her was just an empty shell that could not move, a body without a soul. Chapter 436. 2 lines of tears slid down Shun Yueqi's cheeks. She's gone at such a young age. As her brother, I'm going to die before him. Father and mother will only have me as their only son. Sob, sob, sob. No, it's impossible. It's impossible. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. How could something happen to Ji-er? It can't be. Ji-er won't die. She won't die. How is it possible? Shangguan Yu murmured to himself as he staggered and fell backward. Shun Yueqi watched as his body fell back powerlessly. His face was deathly pale and bloodless. He sat on the ground and cried. Because he had fallen on the ground, his palms were bleeding from being cut by the stones. His snow-white robe was also stained with dust, causing his body to become a lot dirtier. But he didn't seem to feel it. He struggled to get up from the ground and walked forward with difficulty. Shun Yueqi didn't know where he was going. He called him a few times, but he didn't respond. He was like an emotionless puppet with no soul and only a body before. Now, he gave Shun Yueqi the illusion that very soon, he wouldn't even have this physical body anymore. He had seen Shangguan Yu's love for Ji-er for so many years. He had always been free to let it go. Because Ji-er didn't like him, he never paid attention to Shangguan Yu. He didn't observe Shangguan Yu carefully. He only knew that there was such a person who had been pestering Ji-er. This was the first time that Shun Yueqi looked at him seriously. After all, he was the eldest son of the Shangguan family and the only son of the family. He couldn't die like this. It was true that Ji-er faked her death. What if he really killed Shangguan Yu? Thinking of this, Shun Yueqi cried enough. He quickly got up from the ground and chased after Shangguan Yu. Shangguan Yu stumbled and swayed as he walked aimlessly. There seemed to be a road of no return in front of him, and there seemed to be nails under his feet. He couldn't even walk steadily. Shun Yueqi knew that he couldn't respond to him. In order to not attract too much attention, he didn't call out to him either. He just followed behind him, following him all the way to the wilderness, through the forest, to a deserted place with few people, and then through the mountains and rivers, to the Broken Heart Cliff. He only relied on his footsteps to run all the way. He didn't feel tired at all. It felt like he was a puppet being controlled by someone else. He was muttering Ji-er's name. As he passed through the forest, a wild beast rushed up to bite him. He didn't resist, letting the beast bite his arm. He didn't seem to feel any pain. For a moment, Shun Yueqi thought that he was going to be eaten by the beast. His bloody arms were all bitten by wild beasts. Later, Shen Yueqi found out that Shangguan Yu really wanted to be eaten by wild beasts. He wanted to die. It was as if the thing he had been chasing for his whole life had suddenly disappeared and would never appear in this world again. He had lost all hope of living. So, Shen Yueqi was horrified. He didn't expect that this skinny man would have such deep feelings for his little sister. It was as if he was possessed. If it wasn't for Imo Wushang, he really couldn't help but try to matchmake Imo Wushang and his little sister. In the future, his little sister would marry such a man. She would be the head of the family, and this man would also do his best to pamper and protect her. He would never let her suffer any grievances. What a shame. Chapter 437. He saved him from the claws of the beast. It was as if he knew that he was following him. He did not turn around to look at him, nor did he speak to him. He continued to murmur the same words that he had said along the way. He continued to walk forward. When he passed by a patch of water, he did not know how deep the water was and walked straight. As a result, he almost drowned. He was so frightened that he quickly jumped into the water and fished him out. He pressed on his chest to let him breathe. He was already a soulless body. This time, he couldn't move. It was even scarier. Fortunately, he saved him in time. The man was fine. When he woke up, he pushed Shangguan Yu away and continued to stumble forward. Shen Yueqi had no choice but to follow Shangguan Yu to the end. He had walked for a long time with Shangguan Yu, and there was no path on the cliff. When Shen Yueqi saw Shangguan Yu jump down, he was shocked and hurriedly used his lightness skill to catch him. In short, Shen Yueqi felt like he was going to be crippled. He even regretted following him. Why did he follow him? Why didn't he just let him die? Damn it! Was this man so fragile? He was so fragile that he was about to die. He couldn't live without his woman, could he? Although he couldn't live without his sister, she was his sister. They were different. Finally, he reached the place he wanted to go, the Broken Heart Cliff. His white robes were no longer clean. They were covered in dust and dirt. Even his handsome face had many scratches and scratches. His arm was covered in blood. It was hard to tell if his arm was still intact or broken. He stood at the top of the Broken Heart Cliff, looking down at the smoke-shrouded cliff. Why did you save me? Shen Yueqi was speechless. My father and your father are old friends. If something happens to you, how are we going to explain to your father? You're the only son your father has. Speaking of this, Shen Yueqi couldn't help but sigh. Shangguan Yu, can we not be so weak? They were all men, and men were supposed to achieve great things. Was there a need to spend all this effort on romance? If my sister dies, you won't be able to live, right? Tell me, aren't you ashamed? Ashamed? Heh! Shangguan Yu smiled weakly and said, from the moment I took the trouble to follow Ji-er, I no longer know what face is. He turned around and saw Shen Yueqi looking at him with disdain. He smiled. Young Master Shen, you must not know what it feels like to be in love. That feeling, when facing the person you love, you can only hope that everything is good for her. If you love her, you can become a demon for her. You can go crazy for her. In the past, I tirelessly followed behind her. Even though I knew that she didn't like me, hated me, or even loathed me, I was still diligent and happy. As long as I could see her every day, it was a kind of satisfaction to me. Do you know, when I saw her holding a whip in disgust and waving it up and down at me, as if he had thought of something funny, he suddenly laughed. His laughter was filled with joy and aftertaste, as if he was completely immersed in it. The way she was angry, the way she bared her fangs and brandished her claws, I found it strangely charming and moving. Everything in this world is beautiful. If I were to describe it, I'm afraid that nothing in this world could compare to 1,000th of her beauty. I can live and die for her. Chapter 438. When the whip in her hand hit me mercilessly, I felt the pain of the whip. That kind of pain was like a pain that penetrated deep into my bones. It was so painful that it was hot and scalding. However, I turned this pain into love and joy. As long as I remembered that she was the one who hit me with the whip, I could not feel the pain anymore. All I could think about was her. When she hit me, I was not angry at all. I was not angry at all. Instead, I thought that she was very cute when she was angry. She has always been so obvious when it comes to whether she likes or dislikes someone. When she likes someone, she can dedicate all of her passion and joy to them. But when she hates someone, just like how she treats me, she can be merciless and completely reject me. She thought that as long as she was fiercer and more ruthless to me and hit me harder with her whips, I would one day back off after losing face and suffering in her hands. But she was wrong. Not only would I not back off, when her whips hit me harder and harder, it was like helplessness in my heart that I couldn't get what I wanted. It was like a branding iron that left a deep, heavy mark on my body. It was so deep, so heavy that it reached into my bones. Brother Shin, after thinking about it, his voice suddenly became hoarse and deep, mixed with deep pain. In order to get her, I used all kinds of means. Perhaps some of the means were unworthy of my identity and made it difficult for me to raise my head in capital city. However, I did not regret it. Even if I almost hurt her, I was willing to use the rest of my life to make up for it. But now, after knowing that she was no longer in this world, I realized that I was wrong. How wrong I was. It turns out that loving someone is to let her live a good life, not to blindly get her. In order to get her, I did so many things to hurt her. I thought that in this world, only I could give her happiness, and I destroyed all the fantasies she liked. Before this, I didn't understand. I didn't understand why I treated her so well, and why she still hated me so much. I could tolerate everything about her, whether it was her stubbornness or her willfulness. Later on, when I saw her with Imo Wushang, I was filled with hatred. I don't understand. I've been so good to her. Why does she hate me so much? Why does she want to reject me? She keeps saying that she's the emperor's woman and doesn't want to implicate me and my Shangguan clan. But why can she be with Imo Wushang? That man wanted to kill her in the past. She's actually willing to stay by his side and accompany him without any regrets. At that moment, I could not deny the anger and jealousy in my heart. Why can Imo Wushang do it, but why can't I? I just want to be by her side, and when she needs me, she can see me whenever she turns her head. But she's stingy now, so she wants to take back even this little bit. Shinyuechi, tell me, my heart isn't made of iron. I've sacrificed for so long, so many years, and suffered so much coldness and discrimination. I have no regrets, but when another man is accepted by her, I also feel pain, jealousy. Or is it that my identity is not comparable to Imo Wushang's, and I can't compare to the current emperors? But no one can compare to my heart. I'm wholeheartedly devoted to her, and my feelings for her will never change. I will only have her as my wife, and I will treat her well for the rest of my life. But why? Chapter 440. Shinyuechi found that his head was really swollen now. He found that this guy was a bit stupid. No wonder his sister didn't like him. If he was so stupid, it would be strange if she liked him. He hesitated on the spot. He had just said that Yuji was not dead in a moment of desperation. He was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and tell Shangguan Yu everything later. After all, Ji-er had told him that only the people of the general's mansion could know, and no one else could know. But if he didn't say it, the cold wind blew on his face, making him feel cold. While he was hesitating, the white blood-red robe suddenly jumped. Shinyuechi was shocked and cursed out loud. Then, he saw the snow-white figure falling straight down. He was shocked and rushed down without thinking, jumping down the cliff with him. When he finally grabbed the corner of Shangguan Yu's clothes, Shangguan Yu felt someone pulling him and opened his eyes. He almost couldn't believe that Shun Yuechi also jumped down with him. Brother Yuechi Yu. He pursed his lips. At this moment, he didn't know what to say. His heart was in a mess. Ji-er was dead. He had no hope of living. But he was the only one who wanted to die. He didn't want to drag Shin Yuechi down with him. Uncle Shin and Auntie Shun had just lost their beloved daughter. It was hard for them to accept seeing their daughter die before them. If Shin Yuechi were to leave them now, he didn't know if their bodies would be able to take it. He grabbed Shin Yuechi's wrist and wanted to send him up with the last bit of internal force. The wind was too strong at the bottom of the cliff, especially when they were falling straight down. It was too fast for Shin Yuechi to bear. His face was almost distorted by the wind. He threw himself into Shangguan Yu's arms and cried bitterly. "Wait for me to finish talking. Jump, I don't want to die. You bastard. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Don't think about reincarnating. I'll pester you to death. Brother Yuechi." Shangguan Yu looked at him with mixed feelings as he threw himself into his arms, his hands holding his waist tightly, and he had no strength left to send him up. In the past, only women would throw themselves at men. In the past, there were many women who did the same to him, but because he only had Ji-er in his heart, he would usually reject them completely. Of course, there were a few women who didn't stop them. They were from aristocratic families and took advantage of the moment when he was unprepared. But for a man, this was definitely the first time Shangguan Yu had experienced this. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. He just looked at Shin Yuechi and listened to the whistling wind and his painful cries. He didn't know whether he should hug him or not. He just stood there, not knowing what to do. Shin Yuechi didn't feel him hugging her for a long time. She was so scared that she took the initiative to grab his hand and hug herself as they fell. "Shangguan Yu, I'm warning you. When we reach the bottom, you'll fall under me and be my cushion. It doesn't matter if you're smashed to pieces, but even if I die, I want to die a beautiful death. I can't die like a piece of meat." "You, Brother Yuechi, let go of me. I can send you up." Aside from letting go, Shin Yuechi did not believe him at all. Although he did not want to die, and if he had a second chance, he would not have jumped off the cliff so impulsively. However, there were not so many chances to do so. There was clearly a layer of hazy fog below, and he couldn't see anything clearly. It was really scary to look at. Cough, cough. The sound of coughing came from behind them. Shin Yuechi and Shangguan Yu looked back at the same time and saw Ji-Chu covering his mouth and looking at them awkwardly. Shin Yuechi also thought of the position he and Shangguan Yu were in now. The two of them were hugging each other, with his hand holding Shangguan Yu's collar and Shangguan Yu's arms around his waist. Chapter 442. The two of them behaved intimately, sticking close to each other. If one of them was a woman, they would definitely be lovers who would go through life and death together. But they were two men. That was why Ji-Chu suddenly coughed. Ji-Chu wasn't surprised by their appearance, especially Shangguan Yu. However, he didn't expect Shin Yuechi to appear here, so he was greatly surprised. "Young Master Shangguan, eldest young master." He greeted the two of them. Seeing him, Shangguan Yu's mind flashed with countless conjectures. Finally, he mocked himself. He didn't doubt that it was Ji-Chu who saved them. But Ji-Chu was Imo Wushang's bodyguard. If he was here, did it mean that Imo Wushang was here too? He mocked himself because he thought he was the first to arrive when Ji-Er was in trouble. But he didn't expect that Imo Wushang would always be one step ahead of him. His emotions probably affected Shin Yuechi, who was beside him. Shin Yuechi jumped out of his arms and kicked him. Shangguan Yu staggered and almost fell to the ground. Luckily, Ji-Chu caught him in time. He barely managed to stand up. "Shangguan Yu, are you out of your mind? I told you that Ji-Er is fine. She's alive and well. You didn't believe me and insisted on jumping with me. Not only is there something wrong with your brain, I think your IQ is 0. Shangguan Yu. Although he was in deep sorrow, he wasn't completely irrational or amnesiac. Shin Yuechi said that he was the one who insisted on jumping with him. Shin Yuechi didn't even look at him. He was still throwing a tantrum. It's all thanks to Bodyguard G's sudden appearance. If it weren't for Bodyguard G's sudden appearance and saving our lives, I would have been smashed to pieces along with you on this heartbroken cliff. Oh, Guard G, where's my little sister? Oh. Ji-Chu looked at Shangguan Yu and said respectfully, Miss Shan is with my master. Take me to her. Young Master Shun, please follow me. Is Ji-Er really fine? If it was Shin Yuechi, Shangguan Yu wouldn't believe it. But if it was Ji-Chu who said it, Shangguan Yu's eyes had been glued to Ji Chu from the moment Shangguan Yu asked Ji Chu. He didn't miss any expression on Ji Chu's face. Ji Chu smiled. Miss Shin is indeed safe and sound with my master. If young Master Shangguan doesn't believe me, you can go and take a look with this subordinate. Naturally, Shangguan Yu would follow him to take a look. Right now, he didn't believe anyone, even if it was Ji Chu. However, he still had to confirm it, because Ji Chu had no reason to lie to him. In the cave, Shin Yueji consecutively ate 2 roasted rabbits. In fact, she was planning to let Imo Wushang catch the second one for himself. However, when he finished roasting it, he discovered that she had already finished the first one. Thus, he took the initiative to hand over the roasted rabbit to her. She ate all the meat, and the man only ate a few mouthfuls of her leftover bones and some bad meat. Seeing Imo Wushang's appearance, Shun Yueji felt a little upset. She changed her sleeping position and turned her back to him, planning to not look at him. She was so full that she didn't want to move. She rubbed her stomach and whimpered, "Imo Wushang." Hearing her voice, the man walked to her and bent down. He saw her hand on her bulging stomach, and her little face was ferocious. He touched it with his big hand, feeling a little distressed. "What's wrong?" Chapter 443. I'm too full. I don't want to move. Give me a massage. The man obediently rubbed her belly, carefully and with just the right amount of strength. Is it uncomfortable? What do you think? Shun Yueji rolled her eyes at him. Try eating 2 rabbits at once. And such a big rabbit. Imo Wushang. Rabbits are so cute. How can you eat them? Shun Yueji covered her face. She didn't know what she was doing. She just said whatever came to her mind. The man looked at her helplessly. Be good. I brought you the rabbits after I cleaned them outside. He was afraid that she wouldn't eat them because they were too cute to be alive. So he asked Ji Chu to clean them up outside. It's not comfortable to sleep in the cave. When will the dog emperor come to me? I don't want to sleep here for the next few nights. Hearing her dissatisfied complaints, Imo Wushang rubbed her belly a little harder. Shin Yueji felt it. She slapped his hand away and glared at him. What are you doing? If you're not comfortable, you can sleep in my arms. I'll hold you to sleep. Shin Yueji squinted at his handsome face for a while and suddenly smiled. That won't do. I'll sleep for so long. What if your body becomes stiff? My heart will ache. She leaned over and kissed the man's good-looking face. Imo Wushang, will you sleep with me? The man's black eyes were full of warmth. He looked at her lovingly. Do you want to be alone? Yes. Shin Yueji nodded cooperatively. I feel very uncomfortable without you holding me to sleep. My heart is empty. Every morning when I wake up, I will subconsciously touch the bed, but I'm very disappointed when I don't touch you. Imo Wushang, do you think I'm sick? The man didn't speak but stared at her. Just when Shin Yueji thought he was going to do something, the man suddenly smiled. The man who didn't like to smile gave people the feeling of a cold sculpture. The sculpture was so perfect that it didn't look like a real person. In the end, it lacked a trace of warmth. When he smiled, he was even more eye-catching and beautiful than a myriad of flowers blooming at the same time. In other words, even 100 flowers could not compare to his alluring smile. For a moment, Shun Yueji was stunned. She stared at him blankly. It was indeed rare for a man to be this beautiful. Imo Wushang. She reached out to touch his face, feeling his inhuman existence. Why are you laughing? Such a beautiful smile almost made her think that she was in a dream. It was so beautiful that it didn't seem like a real person. It seduced her so much that she lost 6 of her 7 spirits. In fact, Shin Yueji even had an illusion that if Imo Wushang hadn't liked her so strongly and had smiled at her, she might not have hated him so much. After all, there was no one in this world who wouldn't like such a good-looking man, even if she already had Feng Juqing in her heart at that time. But, Jier can't leave me now? Hearing the man's explicit words, Shin Yueji coughed in a low voice and then turned her face away awkwardly. Don't talk nonsense. When did I say that I can't leave you? Don't flatter yourself. The man smiled and kissed her little mouth, which was pouting because of anger. I was wrong. I can't leave you. Stop it. Chapter 444. Shin Yueji blushed and burrowed into his arms. "Jeer, little sister." Two voices rang out from behind her. Shin Yueji was startled. She quickly got up from the man's arms and looked at the three men at the entrance of the cave. Like Ji Chu, she wasn't surprised that Shin Yueji was here. But why was Shang Guanyu here? From the moment he saw Shin Yueji, Shang Guanyu acted as if they didn't exist. He quickly stepped forward and looked Shin Yueji up and down. Seeing that she was really unharmed, he felt as if he had found a treasure after losing it. Even though he was in front of Imo Wushang, he still quickly walked in front of Shin Yueji and grabbed her hand, resisting the urge to hug her. Instead, he carefully looked at her and asked, "Jeer, is that really you?" "It's me." Shin Yueji was probably touched by the man's scarlet eyes. Although she didn't know what he had experienced during the time she jumped off the cliff, she could see that he was covered in blood. His arm was empty, and the wound on it was obvious that the blood had not stopped flowing. He had only been standing there for a while, but it was already stained with blood. Shin Yueji couldn't tell what she was feeling. She looked at Shang Guanyu and pursed her lips. "I'm sorry." She did not know that Shang Guanyu would have such a reaction when he found out that she had jumped off the cliff. Even if she was very open-minded about such things, and even if she had a heart of stone, seeing Shang Guanyu's current state, she knew that he was in such a miserable state because of her. How could her heart not be moved by this? Moreover, compared to the previous Shang Guanyu, the way he looked at her today was so clear, pure, and careful. There was no strong possessive feeling in his eyes. Shin Yueji knew that he had changed a lot through this incident. She had never thought that her every move would cause him to care so much. This kind of love, from the intense possessiveness to now only wishing for her to be well. Suddenly, she envied the original lord. In her eyes, she was so blessed to have a family that loved her so much, to have a man who could abandon everything at any time for her. She was like a favored child of the heavens. "You guys go out first. I have something to say to Shang Guanyu alone." Shin Yueji pushed the man beside her. "Imo Wushang, can you go out first? I'll just have a few words with him. He'll be fine soon." Imo Wushang kissed her cheek. It was rare that he didn't make things difficult for her. He stood up and left. Shin Yueji hurriedly called out to him when she saw him leaving. Imo Wushang looked back at her. Shin Yueji blushed and returned his clothes to him. "It's windy outside. Put on your clothes and be careful not to catch a cold." Imo Wushang returned the clothes to her and draped them over her shoulders. Compared to solitude, solitude wishes for your health to be fine. Chapter 445. So what if it's pure? So what if it's impure? Shin Yueji smiled faintly. "This is your matter. I'm an outsider, and it's not convenient for me to intervene. You can do whatever you want." Imperial concubine Shun, how can you be so heartless? Before you entered the palace, you promised us again and again that you would protect us in the harem. Now that Miss and I are in trouble, you don't want to save us. Didn't Her Highness the Empress say to drag this lowly servant out and beat her to death? How can she let her slander Her Highness the Empress? Shin Yueji, how dare you? Shuangshi shouted sternly. You're arrogant and disrespectful. Even a shameless person can't be as thick-skinned as you. If I had known that you would be so ungrateful and repay kindness with kindness, I would have killed you directly. You, imperial concubine. I know that today's mistake is all Xiaoyu's fault, but Xiaoyu grew up with me. Li Yingying shed tears and knelt in front of Shin Yueji again. Empress will definitely listen to Jiejia's words. I beg Jiejia, for Chia's sake, to plead for Xiaoyu and spare her life. I don't have any relatives in this world. Only Xiaoyu has been with me until now. If she also dies, then I really can't live in this world. Imperial concubine, sigh. Shin Yueji took a sip of tea and sighed. Then she looked at her. Imperial concubine Ying, you're making things difficult for me. Li Yingying looked up at her with tears in her eyes. I know that I'm making things difficult for sister, but do you know what Xiaoyu said today? If I don't explain, and the Empress believes it, what will happen to me? You only think of her. Don't you think of me? You knelt in front of me just now. Are you going to abandon me for Xiaoyu? In order to save his majesty, this consort risked her life and almost lost her life. Now that this consort has survived the calamity, this consort has finally managed to keep her life. Originally, this consort had planned to recuperate quietly in this Phoenix Perch Palace, but the two of you, master and servant, were so restless and came running over to try to get rid of me. Back then, if it wasn't for the fact that I pitted you two, master and servant, I wouldn't have brought you two to my side. I've given you a favor, but you shouldn't be too greedy. You'll always think that you deserve this favor and that it's inexhaustible. You don't know the right amount. Concubine Shan's lesson is right. This concubine will remember it. When we return, this concubine will discipline Xiao Yu more strictly so that she will have a good memory. I only hope that... Does concubine Ing not understand Bengong's words? This empress has already made it clear enough. This is your own matter. This empress is an outsider and will not interfere. Xin Yueji's words caused Li Yingying's expression to change. She couldn't say another word for a long time. He probably didn't think that Shen Yueji could really stand by and watch to this extent. Imperial concubine Shen. She stared at her, unwilling to give up. Since that's the case, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and drag this slut out. As soon as Nanny Deng gave the order, someone immediately came forward to pull Xiao Yu. Wait, Shun Yueji said lightly. When Nanny Deng heard this, she paused and subconsciously looked at Gu Yuan. When she saw Gu Yuan looking at her, she respectfully retreated to the side. Empress, since this Xiao Yu is framing this empress, her life and death should be decided by this empress. Younger sister's body is unwell. What you need to do now is to recuperate. Bengong will deal with this lowly slut for you. What if Bengong is unwilling? Chapter 446. Shunguofei. How dare you call yourself this consort in front of Her Majesty the Empress? From Shun Yueji's previous self-address, Deng Momo wanted to burst out in anger, but because her consort did not say anything, she suppressed her anger. But she did not expect. This Shun Yueji did not repent and became bolder. This clearly showed that she did not put Gu Yuan in her eyes. Even Gu Yuan could clearly see the haze that flashed across her beautiful face. Guifei dared to call herself this consort in front of Her Majesty. If this was not insubordination, then what was? She did not put her, the Empress, in her eyes at all. Since when did she, Shun Yueji, become so condescending towards her? Gu Yuan clenched her fists, and her sharp nails dug deep into her palms. She looked at her coldly. Shun Guifei, are you relying on His Majesty's favor to look down on me? Not at all. Shin Yueji smiled slightly. The Empress is too serious. It's just that I suddenly feel that since the Emperor wants Bin Gong to be on the same level as the Empress, and our statuses are also equal, you are just a rank higher than me. Why should Bin Gong lower my status to curry favor with someone who wants to make trouble for Bin Gong? You. Did you not come today because of Xiao Yu's words that reversed right and wrong and wanted to find trouble with Bin Gong? So Shen Guifei is blaming Bin Gong for misunderstanding you. At that time when this girl and Shuangxi were arguing outside the hall, their words were all reasonable. Even if Shen Guifei heard it, she would not have the slightest doubt. If Shen Guifei feels that Bin Gong has made you unhappy, then Bin Gong will apologize to Shen Guifei. I don't dare to accept elder sister Empress wrongs. I'll say it again, Xiao Yu is targeting me. Both of them were personally brought into the palace by this Empress. As for elder sister Empress, if you're doing this to check on this Empress injuries, this Empress is more than happy to accept it. However, if you're trying to touch one of my people, then don't blame this Empress for not showing mercy. When the time comes, I'll drive you away. She covered her mouth and laughed. Sister Empress is still the mistress of the harem. If you're really chased out by this consort, losing face for the harem is a small matter. I'm afraid that in the future, the younger sisters in the harem will also talk about you. I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to establish the dignity of the Empress in the inner palace for a while. Gu Yuan's face paled. She was used to being arrogant in the Gu residence, and after becoming Empress, no one dared to offend her in the harem because of the Gu family. Now, with Shun Yueji's eloquent words, she found that she had no strength to refute. The so-called magnanimity and majesty of the Empress were not worth mentioning in front of Shen Yueji. She couldn't help but think of the time when Gu Yueqin was still alive. She didn't know why she would think of Gu Yueqin at this time, and actually subconsciously overlapped her with Shen Yueji. She was reprimanding Gu Yueqin, no matter if it was insults or sarcasm. All along, Gu Yueqin had lowered her head and didn't dare to refute even half a word. Unlike Shen Yueji, every word was directed at her, hinting at something, but she couldn't find a place to interrupt, as if she was the one at fault. She admitted that she came here to find trouble with Shen Yueji, and also admitted that when she heard the confrontation between Xiao Yu and Shuangxi outside, she wanted to use this opportunity to get rid of her. Chapter 447. Even if she couldn't get rid of her, she had to break her spirit and make her realize who was the master of the harem, who was the master of the 6 harem. But now, not only did she not get any advantage from her, but she was also humiliated by her words. "Your Highness," Nanny Ding called her softly when she saw her expression was not right. "If Empress' older sister isn't feeling well, you should return first. His Majesty loves you so much. If anything were to happen to you while you're here with Bin Gong, I'm afraid that His Majesty won't let it go. This Chia doesn't wish for the relationship between this Chia and His Majesty to have a conflict because of Empress' older sister." Maybe it was because of Shen Yueji's words or something else. Gu Yuan suddenly had an idea and smiled. She was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, she smiled at Shen Yueji and took a sip of tea elegantly. "Sister Ing Fei." When Li Yingying heard her calling her, she respectfully walked in front of her and bowed. "Empress sister, before you ask for help, you should know who is the master of the harem. She is just an imperial concubine. How can her title surpass that of the Empress?" "Sister Empress is right." Li Yingying looked back at Shen Yueji cautiously and echoed respectfully, instead of begging her. She continued to smile. She looked more approachable than gentle and dignified just now. "You'd better beg me. You and I are both the Emperor's women. How can I refuse my sister's request?" The woman on the bed sneered. She looked at the source of the sound and saw Shen Yueji's pale and delicate face full of sarcasm, especially when she was looking at her naked. The sarcastic look was hard to ignore and fell on her body. She clenched her fists again under her long sleeves. "If I remember correctly, just now, Sister Ing Fei has begged the Empress many times and knelt to the Empress many times. What is the Empress thinking?" "Miss, Her Highness is right. She is the master of the harem. Everything in the harem is decided by her." Xiao Yu broke away from the 2 eunuchs who were holding her down. She didn't know if it was because they were too loose, but she easily got rid of them. She hurriedly climbed up from the ground and crawled in front of Gu Yuan. She groveled on the ground and said, "Miss, please beg the Empress. Don't beg that bitch. That bitch wanted us to die long ago. She won't save us." Li Yingying hesitated. She looked at Shen Yueji, who was calm and indifferent. Then she looked at Gu Yuan, who was calm and raised her eyebrows. Nobody knew what she was thinking. She didn't have Xiao Yu just now. She suddenly changed her mind. She was not a fool. She was not like Xiao Yu of mind. But for Xiao Yu's sake, Li Yingying hesitated for a moment before she knelt down in front of Gu Yuan. "This concubine begs elder sister Empress to spare Xiao Yu's life." Chapter 448. Li Yingying was soft-hearted after all. She did not dare to look at Shen Yueji again and buried her head low. "As long as your Imperial Highness the Empress is willing to spare Xiao Yu's life, no matter what you want this concubine to do, this concubine will do it." "Good. This is the only chance for you to save Xiao Yu. If Ing Fei does not cooperate, Bin Gong cannot guarantee that Xiao Yu will still be alive." As she said this, her eyes seemed to glance at Shen Yueji, who was sitting on the high seat. "You should not count on Shen Guifei to save you. She is currently injured and should take care of her body. This kind of trivial matter, Bin Gong will not be able to let her worry about it. Therefore, Bin Gong will simply solve it for her. Even if the Emperor knows about this matter, he will side with Bin Gong." After all, she smiled slightly, No matter how equal our identities are, Bingong is still the queen of the inner palace. In this inner palace, everything is decided by Bingong. Seeing that Shin Yueji didn't refute her this time, she couldn't help but feel more confident in her heart. She was always blocked by Shun Yueji's original words. Even she had some doubts about whether what she said was true. She, as the Empress, was really afraid of an imperial concubine under the Empress. Since Bingong has seen Shun Guifei and saw that Shun Guifei is fine, Bingong can rest assured, Deng Momo. This servant is here. Go back with Bingong.
Yes.
Deng Momo saw her get up and quickly went forward to support her. Before she left, Gu Yuan turned her head to look at Liang Ying. Consorting should have arrived earlier than this consort. Since she has arrived earlier than this consort, she must have spoken quite a bit with Consort Shin. No matter how good the relationship between you two sisters is, don't forget that Consort Shin is currently injured. She should take a good rest and recuperate. Currently, the Emperor dotes on her. If something were to happen to her, it's hard to guarantee that the Emperor won't be angry and push this responsibility onto Consorting. Definitely not. Xiao Yu retorted, the Emperor likes my imperial concubine so much. He will not punish my imperial concubine because of this vicious woman. Empress, you can rest assured. Really? Glancing at Xiao Yu's complacent face, Gu Yuan suddenly smiled. This consort has already reminded you. How you choose is up to little sister Ing Fei. Younger sister Guifei, take good care of your body. Ben Gong can't bear to see that your face is so pale and your body is so weak that it's like a gust of wind could blow you away. In the future, when your body has more or less recovered, this consort will personally pay you a visit. Sister Empress, take care. This consort is injured, so I won't be seeing you off. Chapter 449. Even if she promised Xiao Yu, she didn't really want to. They really wanted to betray Shin Yueji, but as Xiao Yu said, the harem was a dangerous place. They had just entered the harem, and there was no backer behind them. It was not enough to rely on the protection of the Emperor. But she also felt Xiao Yu's impatience. Xiao Yu insisted on dragging her to go with Gu Yuan. Although she didn't understand why Gu Yuan suddenly let them go, but, Her Majesty, there was a cry of alarm. Everyone in the hall instinctively turned to look at the source of the exclamation. They saw Gu Yuan, who was fine, fell down powerlessly. If it weren't for Nanny Ding, who was next to her, who was quick to catch her in time, she would have fallen to the ground. At this moment, Nanny Ding looked at Gu Yuan, whose face was extremely pale and bloodless. Empress, wake up, wake up. Please don't scare me. Someone, come quickly. Call the imperial physician. Inform the emperor. Hurry. If anything happens to the empress, all the servants in Feng Qi Palace won't be able to live. What happened? Li Yingying was also at a loss for this sudden situation. She hurried forward to check Gu Yuan's reaction. But before she could go over, another sharp voice sounded in her ears. Xiao Yu suddenly glared at Shen Yueji, who was behind her, and loudly reprimanded her. Her angry little face became distorted. Imperial concubine Shun, you have such a vicious heart. You actually want to plot against the Empress. As soon as Xiao Yu said this, Li Yingying's face immediately changed. She understood why Gu Yuan suddenly let them go, and why she suddenly fainted on the ground. Xiao Yu was ashamed and angry at the same time. Her Highness the Empress only said a few words to you because of your evil intentions. I didn't think that you would be dissatisfied and order your own maidservants to drug Her Highness the Empress tea, wanting to put her to death. Double Happiness's face was ugly. I admit that I poured the tea just now, but the tea was clean. What poison could there be? Shut up. No one knows better than me what kind of person you are. You are the same as your master. You can't bear to see others do well. The same vicious intentions, the same heart as a snake and scorpion. When His Majesty arrives, I will definitely expose the crimes of the two of you. Whether the Empress fainted from exhaustion or was poisoned by Shuang Shi, we will know once the imperial physician comes and examines. You insist that Bin Gong ordered Shuang Shi to poison her. Lady Xiao Yu, do you not want your tongue anymore? Shin Yueji said lightly, her tone soft and not imposing, but for some reason, Xiao Yu felt an inexplicable chill down her spine, especially her tongue. It was numb, as if it would be cut off at any moment. Even so, she did not give up and continued to argue. Shin Guifei is relying on her maiden family as a backer and is so lawless. She even said words to threaten me. Are you afraid that this matter will be exposed, and when the emperor comes over, he will know of your poisonous heart and feel fear? Shun Yueji was almost amused by her ignorant words. As it turned out, she did laugh out loud. She shook her head. I have already said it. Whether he fainted from exhaustion or from being poisoned, the imperial physician will know once he arrives. Didn't the empress just serve him in bed? His Majesty is after all young, and has not had sexual intercourse for many years. It is inevitable that his needs will be different from ordinary people. Chapter 450. So, she continued to smile. It's just a matter of an imperial physician checking the pulse. But you insist that I poison the empress? Her beautiful eyebrows slightly narrowed. What are you trying to do? Or is it you who poisoned the empress? The purpose is to frame me? To put me in a hopeless situation? You. Don't talk nonsense. I don't know anything about poisons. On the other hand, everyone in your Shen family is a genius in using poisons. How can you pin this crime on me just because you're afraid of being exposed? If that's the case, Shen Yueji's expression became cold. Why don't you conclude that the empress fainted because she was weak, but insist that I poisoned her? Double happiness. I'm here. Coincidentally, you also learned some medical skills when you were in the general's mansion. Before the imperial physician comes, quickly diagnose the empress to see if she was poisoned, or just fainted? Yes, your highness. Seeing that double happiness really came forward to diagnose Gu Yuan, Xiao Yu hurriedly stopped her. Imperial concubine Shan, you are so vicious. Not only did you poison the empress, but you also want to put the empress to death? Anyway, they have already informed the emperor. Whether the empress was poisoned or not, when the imperial physician comes, they will decide in front of the emperor. How can a little maid by your side compare to the imperial physician in the palace? I think you are the vicious one. If the empress was poisoned with a fatal poison, you will delay the best time for me to save her. Shuangshi pushed Xiao Yu away and coldly snorted. It's not like you two haven't seen my medical skills before. You should know that I was the one who personally removed the seal on your concubine's body. What about it? You have seen it with your own eyes, and you still doubt my medical skills? Xiao Yu was rendered speechless. She had witnessed Shuangshi's medical skills with her own eyes. Moreover, it was very difficult to remove the forbidden substance from a woman's body. However, Shuangshi only used less than the time it took for half an incense stick to burn to easily remove the forbidden substance from Mrs. body. Moreover, Miss was not injured at all. This was enough to show that Shuangshi's medical skills were better than even the imperial physicians in the imperial harem. This time, Double Happiness unceremoniously pushed Xiao Yu away and walked towards Gu Yuan. However, before he could reach her, the emperor has arrived. Gao Dazhong's report made everyone present smile, especially Xiao Yu, who was so proud of herself that her small face was almost squinting. She proudly looked at Shun Yueji. Her proud eyes seemed to say, "Look, let's see what else you have to say when the emperor is here." This concubine greets the emperor. As Feng Juqing entered, all the servants of Phoenix Perch Palace dropped to their knees. The handsome and gentle man was like a deity. From the moment he appeared, Li Yingying's gaze fell on him, and she couldn't tear her eyes away. She half bowed to him. The man didn't even look at Gu Yuan, who had fainted on the ground, let alone look at her. He strode towards the bed and embraced the frail Shin Yueji. "Since you are awake, why didn't you let the servants of Phoenix Perch Palace inform us?" His tone was gentle as he looked at her affectionately. His elegant tone carried a bit of reproach, but more than that, it was pity. Chapter 451. Shin Yueji used her hand to draw circles on his chest. This chinchilla doesn't want to distract the emperor. Your Majesty has to deal with the court affairs every day, and I only have some minor injuries. How can it be more important than the state affairs? When your Majesty has dealt with the government affairs, you will naturally come to see me. The man looked at her helplessly and grabbed her little hand that was making trouble on his chest. Yueji, don't make trouble. Since you are injured, lie on the bed and rest. Is there anything wrong with your body? I will summon an imperial physician to take a look at you. Your Majesty, the Empress has been poisoned. He probably didn't expect that the Emperor didn't come here for the Empress, nor for her family's young miss. His gaze didn't fall on them, but the way he looked at Shin Yueji made Xiao Yu think that she was seeing things. She bit her lips and finally couldn't help but remind him. Li Yingying's face was also pale. When she met the Emperor's gaze, she quickly stood up and pretended to be strong. The Emperor's gaze only fell on her for a moment before he withdrew his gaze and then looked at a petite figure not far away that he had deliberately missed. At this moment, she was lying on the ground, pale and lifeless, like a dead person. He comforted Shin Yueji in his arms, but his words were to Gao Daizhong, who was next to him. How is the Empress? Xiao Yu hurriedly answered. It's Imperial Concubine Shen. Your Majesty, it's Imperial Concubine Shen. Imperial Concubine Shen murdered the Empress and publicly poisoned the tea that the Empress drank. Your Majesty, you must uphold justice for the Empress. The Empress knew that Imperial Concubine Shen returned to the palace safely and was injured, so she specially came to see her. Who knew that because of the dispute between me and Shuangxi, the Empress and Imperial Concubine Shen had a conflict and were unhappy. Imperial Concubine Shen publicly poisoned the Empress because of your Majesty's love for her. If your Majesty doesn't believe it, you can ask Nanny Ding and my mother. We all saw it with our own eyes. There is no falsehood. Your Majesty, you can summon an imperial physician. While Xiao Yu was talking, an imperial physician came over with a box. After the imperial physician, who was over 50 years old, greeted Feng Zhiqing, he put down the medicine box and felt Gu Yuan's pulse. The old man's brows furrowed again and again. In the end, he knelt on the ground and bowed deeply to Feng Zhiqing. Your Majesty, the Empress was poisoned by a poison known as the poison flower. Poisonous flowers were not rare in the capital. They were called poisonous flowers, and those who were poisoned were as beautiful as their name suggested. For a short period of time, their bodies would not be affected, but if it accumulated, the poisonous flowers would invade their internal organs, and they would die from organ failure. What was even more terrifying was that their internal organs would be devoured by the poisonous flowers, and they would be covered in poisonous flowers. Some of the people present did not understand how poisonous this poisonous flower was, so the imperial physician carefully explained the origin of this poisonous flower. Everyone was shocked, especially Li Yingying. In the beginning, she didn't believe that Shen Yueji really poisoned the Empress. It was very possible that this was Xiao Yu purposely making things up and exaggerating. Speaking of which, she still believed Shin Yueji's words. Maybe the Empress fainted because of a moment of weakness. When he looked at Shen Yueji again, he found that there was something wrong with her expression. Her brows were furrowed and her face was taut. Was she really poisoned? Gu Yuan really did not know anything about poisons. Even if she had ordered her confidant to do this, she would not have spent so much to set an example. Moreover, the poison of the poisonous flower was very fierce. With the previous example, she would not be so impulsive to use her body as an experiment this time. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.